Hello, everyone. Hello, and welcome to tonight's meeting of the Hand-Eye Supply Curiosity Club. We're your hosts this evening. I am Tobias Verblinger, and this is Will Lacoma. Together, we have a number of curious and exciting topics to share with you.
As attendees of the Hand-Eye Supply Curiosity Club, you're all now members, provided you adhere to our philosophy. Ex Curiositas Scientia. We pledge to learn without prejudice in pursuit of our mutual goal, perpetual noviceship. We admit that it is impossible to know everything about anything, and thus we remain perpetually curious and perpetually novice.
This is our flag and our mascot, Franklin. The lightning bolt represents the receipt of knowledge, the enlightenment of illumination, the resonance of truths understood. It awakens and excites us and makes us hungry for more. And now let's give a warm Curiosity Club welcome to Debbie Ever. And Charlotte, are you talking to?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, no, I didn't know. But yes, that's totally okay. And Charlotte.
Yay!
You clapped for yourself.
Yeah, that's because I have confidence. I'm shameless. So who here knows about me? And who here is just here for the Curiosity Club?
And who here is for the beer?
Well, my name is Debbie Ever, and I build guitar pedals for a living. Professionally, I guess you could say, since I make a living doing it.
Oh, sorry. I won't do that. Oh God, I'm gonna break everything.
So yeah, I build guitar pedals for a living, which is a weird thing to say, and everyone thinks it's interesting. Yeah, I think it's interesting because I never imagined that there was it was as much of a niche market that you could make a living. And that's being in the guitar pedal business has made me learn about the fact that you can make a living doing whatever you love, even if it's something as stupid as guitar pedals. I know it sounds silly, but this isn't as easy as doing vlogs. I thought it was going to be, but it's not. Can I just replace you guys with, here, I'll just look at the webcam. Okay. But yeah, so I started building guitar pedals in 2003 because I was really into guitar pedals. I don't know, does everyone know what a guitar pedal is? Kinda, yes, sort of, okay. I mean, they're pretty much just like little electronic boxes that you put your guitar signals through and it makes different sounds. The most basic of these is a boost. It just makes your guitar louder. And then if you mess with that boost in the wrong way, it turns into fuzz. And because I'm not a professional electronics person, I started doing fuzz, and I've been doing fuzz ever since. It was a happy accident. But I got into it because my main passion has always been music, and I've been trying to find a way to not work for the man, or in my case, the Subway man or the Pizza Hut man. Although sometimes after having done this business for 10 years, I do wish to go back to the bliss of being in a delivery car because it's so much easier. but it's not as rewarding. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'd do about anything to keep from going back to retail, so.
Yeah, I rescued her from the cruel grasp of Florida a year ago.
Yeah, I've only been in the business about a year.
Yeah, and she's done everything, which is really nice.
Yeah, actually for about a year now, I've essentially been running her business.
But it goes to show you how easy it is to pick up on after someone's had a decade of experience doing the good and the bad.
Not to say that it was an easy transition.
That's true. Yeah. But yeah, I don't know. Does anyone have questions at this point about the bees? Okay.
Do you have any music projects of your own?
I do, and it's funny because the long and short of it is the reason I went into the pedal biz is because I needed to make money. Not because of life, but because I'm trans. And so I needed to make money from my surgeries. And if it hadn't been for being trans and needing a transition, I probably never would have gotten into this business in the first place. because I love music, and music is what I want to be doing with my life. And it's funny because even though I'm still in the process of transitioning physically, and it costs, literally hundreds of thousands of dollars by the end of everything, I've gotten so involved with the business that I haven't had time to go back into music until very recently. So it's funny. I actually there's this frame store near where I used to live, and I asked someone why they got into doing framing, and they said because they were into art. But then they said they never got back out of framing to get back into art. So it's kind of the whole snake eating its tail thing.
So as much as it's supposed to give you connections and entryways, it just ends up consuming your life.
Yeah.
Not entirely.
Yeah, it is a cautionary tale. Because I'm living it right now. I mean, it's funny. I was, until he said that we only had, but it was going to be 18, 28 minutes. I thought, it's funny, I finally just booked a gig. It's funny that you asked that. And it was for an hour. It was like a singer-songwriter, women's singer-songwriter thing. And I bailed on it because it was acoustic and I want to do dirty rock stuff. But
you need to make an acoustic pedal.
But I was thinking an hour, how could I fill an hour with music? And it's easy for me to fill an hour with rambling about stuff. But I had a point. I always do this. I forgot it. Yeah. Oh, I was going to make the point of the cautionary tale. That's the thing. I am a cautionary tale of everything that you can do wrong in the business and still survive. And I just wanted to kind of point out the things that I've learned in doing this for nearly a decade. Especially being in a business that's highly misogynistic and highly critical and highly just full of so much bullshit. And it's so funny because it's just guitar pedals, but it's seriously
Well, it's just fuzz. That's the thing.
I mean, in particular, it's just fuzz, but it's the core of people's lives. It's the most neurotic people buy guitar pedals and then sell them and buy more. And it's weird how it kind of brings out the worst in music and art and stuff.
I've only been, like I said, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I've only been in the business for a year, and admittedly things are better than when everything first started. But being a queer female in the guitar industry, some of the vitriol I've ended up encountering has been just what the fuck? I just started this job, guys. Chill the fuck out.
Yeah.
But it's one of the things you've talked about is how earlier in the business, when everyone still was perceiving you as male,
it was easier. It was a lot easier.
There was a lot more positivity and a lot more forgiveness.
Yeah, and it's funny because as I transitioned as a business person and the way that I present the business and be more myself, it was weird. There was this magic moment, right before I really crossed over and living full time as a woman, where people are really supportive and I could do no wrong. And there was a point where I transitioned over to being perceived as female that all of a sudden it's almost like I had betrayed the brotherhood. That's how I felt because I was really heavy on the forums. I had a heavy presence on forums and stuff, and then all of a sudden people didn't have my back anymore. And there's a part of me that I still to this day I'm not sure if it's because of the transition or because of how I started treating people, because I'll admit there was a halfway point in the business where I didn't respect my customer base. I think I was a little bit into myself. I was a little full of myself. And it was amazing though, because one of the things I was going to say about running a business is that you, especially with public persona and the internet and stuff, is you either have to commit to your persona or you just have to back the fuck off. Because there's a point where I was really committed to who I was, and then there was a point where I was unsure, and that's when I lost footing and I started to lose respect from people. And I'm just now getting to the point where I guess I'm gaining that foothold again.
Well, yeah, I'd say it's a combination of, I had a point. I'm gonna let you continue. We'll come back to that. I don't want to get us off topic.
I was thinking about this before I do this, and I hardly plan things out. This is just how I do things. But one of the things that I was thinking of is just some key points of if anyone's doing anything with their lives that they're trying to achieve stuff. The one thing, the magic bullet, is that the word? I don't know if that's the word.
I think that is.
Maybe silver? is
I've heard that.
spending as much time as possible doing what you like. And that can, like, you don't necessarily have to have even a goal in mind. Like, I started out, it's funny, I started out when I was a kid, like 13 years old, doing graphic design for a living. And I did it just all the time, just for fun, and eventually got to the point that when I started getting into this pedal business stuff, my graphic design background has like helped me so many ways, just like creating a look for the pedals, creating a look for my website, creating a look for me, et cetera, et cetera. And then when I got into the guitar pedals, I literally would just spend every waking moment trying to learn how these things worked, you know, breadboard, putting in, it's funny actually, I don't have an electronic engineering background, so the way that I got into it is I got some Radio Shack parts, and I literally would put parts into a breadboard until they made sound. Yeah, go ahead.
What's a breadboard?
Oh, a breadboard. A breadboard, so electronics are comprised of components, and they have to be all circuited together a certain way. And so the breadboard allows you to put those components in whichever way you want.
It's like a switchboard, sort of?
It's more like a, that's a good question. It's like, how can
Like a light bright that you plug like.
yes, that's exactly
Basically.
it. That's perfect.
It's not permanent. That's like the.
Yeah. You can put things in, pull things out. And but so it's interesting because since I was, all I wanted to do at the very beginning was to get sound out of a transistor. Transistors are amplifiers. They're switches actually, but they're also amplifiers. It's complicated, and I still don't completely understand it.
I've always kind of fancied your method as sort of like guerrilla engineering.
Yeah, because I mean, it's like evolution. I literally would put in parts until something made a sound that worked. And then I put in another part of a slightly different value, and I keep doing that until like it eventually changed and evolved. And
A handful of your designs are completely made on accident.
most of them are accidents, yeah. And but time. It's all about time. When I first started, I always told my mom, I don't want to go to college. Just give me enough money for a computer, and I'll start my own company. And this was way back in like 2000. I don't know, like right out of high school, I was like, just do that for me. And she was like, no, I want you to go to college. And it's went back and forth with this for a while. And finally, I found an audio engineering class, and I come from Austin, Texas. There was this audio engineering class at one of Willie Nelson's recording studios or something. And it was a summer course, and it was kind of bullshit, but it was cool because you were like in a real studio, and you spent 2 or 3 months, learning to record stuff. And so my mom finally broke down and said, well, you're not going to get a normal education, so I'll pay for this. And so what she ended up doing is actually paying for my living expenses as well. And I spent that 3 months starting my business. So I still ended up doing what my mom wanted. I wanted what my mom wanted to do, but yeah, it happened. But time, it was all about time. Like every time that we weren't at school, I was just sitting there plugging at that breadboard, trying to get sound to come out of it. And I lived cheaply. It was all about living cheaply and just spending as much time as possible. And see, this is the big catch 22.
Yeah.
I was about to say 42, because that's the meaning of life. That's the big catch 22 now, because I am spending all my time on the business, but I want to get to spending all my time on music because I know that that's like the key to success. So now it's this weird balancing act, and it's a conundrum, and it's my new like problem that I'm figuring out because it seems so easy. It's just as simple as I found this out through Reddit of all places, of course. Reddit's a website. Does anyone know what Reddit is? It's a horrible website.
So dangerous if you're trying to get any work done.
Yeah.
It's impossible.
But there's a study done. These two guys were just. There's a study. It's like I can't remember how many hours. I think it's like 10,000 hours before you become proficient at something. It was like darts or something. But yeah. So, any more questions?
Well, I feel like with guitar pedals in particular, like there's a lot, since it's all sort of subjective to people's personal tastes, and there really lacks like a lot of like good terminology to describe the way something sounds because it's it's easier to hear it and it's not that easy to describe. And then there's also a lot of people that that forget that it's subjective and seem to have like very opinionated are very opinionated about what is the correct way for something to sound. Like, how do you navigate that kind of like pressure? I mean, I just feel even as myself, like, as you know, like if I'm picking out like guitar pedals and then like I don't really understand how they work, but I know that like I like something or don't like it, but then like people are like, oh, that's a good one, or oh, that's not a good one.
Right.
I'm like, well, I don't know.
Well, it's funny.
I think it sounds good.
It's so funny because it is very subjective, not only just based on the pedal and the gear, but like from practice space to performance hall to is your amp warmed up, you know, what kind of pedals are you using? There's so many factors involved, and there's no like set thing.
I mean, it would take forever to just list the number of independent factors that's going to ultimately affect your sound.
Yeah.
So when we get emails about just like, hey, this pedal doesn't sound like it was supposed to sound, I'm so upset. It's just like, okay, tell us what pickups you're using, tell us what amp you're using, blah, 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 blah. And
but it's funny because of that. I mean, it's amazing how much of the pedal business is actually is about look and hype and buzzwords and stuff. And like I mean, there's three in the world of guitar pedals as far as overdrives, things that make your guitar sound louder and more distorted and stuff. There's pretty much three main ones: the fuzz face, the tube screamer, and the big muff. And like most of the industry is built on those three things alone. Like clones of those, variations of those. We have the version that has the better parts. We have one that's more closer to the original. And people have dissected, like the Big Muff, for instance, which has been around forever and has so many variations. The original creator, Electro Harmonix, to this day still makes them and makes their own variations of them. But they had so many variations throughout their history since the 60s, I think. That people had gone back and like actually categorized them and their, you know, like which parts they had, which era they were, and then they would, you know, people are cloning versions of those and claiming that theirs is better, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it's funny because one of the things that's actually is becoming a big thing these days is people making guitar pedals that emulate amplifiers. Because amplifiers have their own tone in terms of, you know, the different stages in it, the way it shapes things using EQ, you know, treble, bass, mid. And so people are building guitar pedals that they'll say emulates an amp, even though those guitar pedals are going through another person's amp of a completely different nature, and it's just BS. It's bullshit. It really is. And I try to stay away from all that because, I mean, what I've always loved about what I've done is I just try to make things that sound interesting to me, and sometimes that even means taking a circuit and tweaking one thing in the circuit, and it can make it sound subtly different or completely different. And I don't care if it's noisy, I don't care if it's too loud, or if it like makes a weird stuttery sound at the very end. Like, it's kind of funny. I was part of like the second wave of boutiquers, because I mean there was the standard manufacturers that have been around since the 60s. Then there was the first wave of boutiquers that came around in the 90s, and then there was us. And now it's just flooded. It's crazy, especially, and this is why the place I've taken the business, and going back to the whole Curiosity Club, is I'm embracing the DIY ethic, I guess is the word. Because, I mean, these days, everyone's building guitar pedals for themselves, and everyone's trying to start business doing it. I mean, there's so many, there's thousands of guitar pedal makers around the world. And because, it's funny, there used to be a lot just in America, and now, like, South America is interesting. I have a lot of fans there who want my stuff, but they also have a bunch of local people who, just because of like importing, like it's expensive, importing taxes and that kind of thing. But that's one of the reasons why my DIY kits, I have DIY kits, sorry. I actually have all my schematics and everything available to the public so people can do what they want with my stuff.
So yeah, pretty much anything, not quite everything, but most anything that we sell, you can really build yourself.
Yeah.
A lot of people like, you know, buying from us because, you know, supporting us and whatnot, and, you know, not knowing how the fuck to do it, even though it's really easy, actually.
It's just intimidating at first.
But yeah, I mean, I don't know. That's something that I think is a really big deal, and something that.
Yeah. Well, I like the whole empowering nature of it because it's funny. Oh, go ahead.
I just wondered if, like, a lot of the flack that you catch from the industry, is it So you have your own specific designs, and then you're also, like you were talking about, some of the historic designs.
Yeah.
Do you catch flack from people based on your designs, or is it the guys who are like super geeked out about what has existed in yours isn't exactly perfect to the historical version, or like what's the kind of? So I'm coming from an engineering background where your product speaks for itself, sort of.
Right.
If you make something that's good, people are like, oh, this is good.
Right.
And you don't catch a ton of flack. But it sounds like there's so much drama in.
Oh, it is. It's nothing. It really is. It's not. I mean, there's entire there are communities, new communities, online communities devoted to different. Like for instance, I actually took my fans. This is part of my downfall for a little while there. I branched off to a new forum that I actually just called ilovefuzz.com. And then I invited a bunch of people to like host their forums on there, and then it got cliquey. It went from like being me and my friends to just a bunch of people being cliquey about the gear they like and who they are, and you know, it's funny how forums can develop like little forum celebrities too, and they usually tend to be like really big assholes and stuff. And it's like you can't do anything to fight the celebrity of your forum, so you kind of have to like. That's one of the things I learned is just to like let people talk. It's better to like let people talk and not be all, you know, not try to censor people, even if they're hating you and stuff. But back to what you were saying. You know, it's weird. Sorry, my brain shuts down sometimes.
I'm gonna say, if I might give the question a shot.
Yeah.
We don't get a lot of criticisms based on just like oh, your pedal sounds too much like this or too little like this. I think our biggest criticism is, and actually our biggest praise we get in a lot of cases, is the fact that we build things that the differences are a little too subtle. I guess some people think we build so many different kinds of fuzz, and a lot of people are just like, oh well, what the fuck? It's just fuzz. But what a lot of other people think is just like, I don't know. I like the fact that we're kind of the Baskin Robbins of fuzz. Yeah. We have a bunch of different varieties, and it offers a lot of like different kind of subtlety. Yeah. Like, you know, the gate and the noise floor and, you know, all of that. Like, I don't know. It's kind of a simultaneous like criticism and praise.
Yeah, it's really amusing because people will like seriously like circle jerk over the variations of a Tube Screamer pedal, but then if we, you know, do 5 variations of one of our fuzzes, all of a sudden it's being seen as like we're not being creative enough or something. And then we'll have people complain about the fact that our fuzzes sound too strange compared to the Tube Screamer. So, yeah, but see, that's the thing
Can't win for losing.
Yeah, you can't. But you can't please everybody, and there's niches for everything. So yeah, I think we found a niche.
Do you have a planned approach for how you come up with the idea for a pedal, or is it?
It's funny because back to what she was saying about guerrilla warfare and the circuit board or whatever, guerrilla designing.
Yeah.
For the longest time, my circuits literally were an evolution of the circuit before it. Mm-hmm. Like, the first one I ever made was trying to make a transistor, which is just it's a transistor, a boost. A simple clean boost is a transistor, 2 resistors and 2 capacitors, and those all balance out that transistor so that it can make your guitar signal louder. But I couldn't do that for the life of me because I didn't know the math behind it. So instead, it made the guitar sputter out and sound like crap. But if you put a guitar pedal in front of my little thing, which I call the death button, it would make the fuzz sound really interesting. So I went from this like weird sound to how can I make this weird sound louder? And so at that point, I learned how to actually do a correct boost, and I put the boost in front of that, and then that became my first fuzz pedal that was actually good by itself. And at that point, I was like, well, I like what Zevex is like. He's one of the first wavers who's doing this thing called the Fuzz Factory, which creates like a synth tone to go with your guitar. And I was like, I want to do what he's doing. So the next pedal I built was using that. The death button became the crackle fuzz, which became the tri-fuzz, which became the oscillating version, the synth version, which was the beautiful disaster. And it just kind of went from there. Like I just kept like taking that first circuit and trying to do more with it, and then branching off. And like there was a point where I actually did have like an evolutionary family history of like which pedal is attached to which. So yeah.
I think you should revive that actually.
Yeah.
Although the thing is, I'm not sure if you remember everything.
I do, strangely.
You do?
Yeah. I'm serious, like hours of just sitting there at the breadboard, it's all ingrained in my head. I know too much. Yeah. But any other questions?
do you how much, like, I know that you do a lot of or you've done some for like bigger musicians that have bigger acts and stuff. And like working with certain people like that, how much of your business do you feel like is dialogue and just like kind of warming them up to like like a little bit, I don't want to say BS, but just being like, this is what I do, this is a really warm sound, I like this.
Well,
how important is that? Like,
it's really important. I mean, we're selling shoes here. And at the end of the day, the shoes pretty much do the same thing. There's you got your boots with your, you got your fashion stuff, you got your utility stuff. But at the end of the day, it's all about the brand. And so, I mean, I think the reason I'm as successful as I am is actually because of my graphic design background. I feel like between that and just having an eye for marketing and having a bubbling personality, I guess, I've definitely wooed people into, but also I do have a certain amount of technical background, and I do have a lot of respect for what fuzz is used for. Like, it's interesting. So many what we call, the doctor, dentist, rockers who are trying to emulate their favorite blues sounds, they go for this refined tone that I think was kind of like a watered down version of what Stevie Ray Vaughan used to do. But it's funny because if you really listen to Stevie Ray Vaughan's stuff, it's so raw and off the wall madness. And if you think about what he was trying to emulate, which was Jimi Hendrix, and if you've ever gone back, go to YouTube and look at any live Jimi Hendrix stuff and actually compare like 3 or 4 different set lists or different performances, and each one is just different. The sound is just different and crazy, and he was dealing with all kinds of sounds and problems because it's gear back in the 60s and stuff. And I don't know, like I feel like it's funny, I feel like I have a more true appreciation for kind of like the not give a fuck nature about how it used to be. And meanwhile, the rest of the industry is seriously just like getting into this homogenous area of just like wanting to perfect everything and like refine everything. And all I want to do is keep everything as raw as possible, which is, I think we're doing a good job of it. And it's funny because I'm actually kind of scared about where things are going, because the less and less we have people like the Black Keys, which is funny because the Black Keys are cool, but like they're still more refined than the generation before. And like I was actually talking with someone who's in a much bigger company worldwide. I won't name names or whatever, but it's just huge pedal builder, and they're as scared as I am because it's funny, like the old generation of noise and rock and roll seems to be going away in the public eye.
But there's a bit of a rebellion, though. I mean, like, there's still people who are just like, just like, fuck all of this, and make a lot of ugly noise.
Yeah, while at the same time, there's that undercurrent of people who are just trying to create their own sound and like are trying to look for something more unique. And that's kind of like where we scoop people up. Because we're definitely offering, like, I don't know, alternatives to what's standard, which is what I enjoy doing.
Like on the business side of things, how do you deal with production and taking orders, and like how many, is it just the 2 of you building all these by hand yourself? And
at my peak, it was me and 2 builders, and I'm back to that again. I actually went back to just me. Yeah, and I mean, just straight up, between me and 2 builders, at my best year, we made gross $250,000. Yeah. And that wasn't even working hard. Which is the funniest thing about this industry, and which is why there are so many pompous assholes, because they don't have to try hard. Like one of the most sought after expensive pedals is called the Klon Centaur, which is just an over-glorified boost pedal. But this guy makes them one at a time. I think he's in Germany, maybe? I don't know. But he just makes them one at a time, and I've heard rumors that you actually have to call him and he has to ask what kind of music you play to make sure that he wants you to own one of his pedals.
Oh my god.
Yeah. And there's this big stink about right now because he's actually gone from hand building them to selling out and having them made like, instead of the good components, they're like surface mount, which are tiny microscopic components and stuff.
Alright.
And, but yeah, so it's just me. I'm back to running the business. She's been learning to build pedals. She's been doing a great job of it. And I have a friend, Laura, who's been doing it for a long time, building pedals. And it's great because she just takes, my friend Laura actually goes back to Salem and does it. And, like, we just exchange parts for money and stuff. And yeah, it's really basic. It's just, I buy parts. These days there's so many retailers available for parts because of the industry being so big. When I first started, it was definitely kind of like you had to search out stuff, and if you ran out of stuff, it was horrible because it was like hard to find where to get more things. Like I was building joystick pedals, and I was the only person who could find these fucking joysticks. And now there's a supplier who has like 5 different variety of joysticks, which is great. But yeah, it's insane that we can do all this with so few people.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. It actually doesn't blow my mind too much. I mean, it's actually pretty simple. I mean, between like 2 people with you primarily running the business, I mean, it's actually not a big deal at all.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of, putting the hours in.
Yeah, which is also goes back to the time you put into stuff. Go ahead.
Who was the first person that gave you money for your work?
It's funny. I don't remember the first people, but I remember Mikhail Guzman was a friend of mine. So I built these little batches of pedals using Radio Shack parts, and then I went through these designs, and I ended up from, like, I think 3 generations in of the circuit, I built this thing called the Truly Beautiful Disaster, and I wanted to build 10 pedals, which is such a big deal at the beginning. I was like, I'm gonna build 10, so I need to order enough parts for 10 pedals. And strangely enough, a guy who was in Kuwait, who had money saved up because he was buying gear while he was in the army.
I don't remember this story at all.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Yeah, Mikhail Guzman, he lives in Austin with Rich.
You've never told me this.
Sorry. But he gave me the $300, and all he wanted back was a TBD, a Truly Beautiful Disaster. So he gave me $300, and I bought my first batch of 10, and that was that. Yeah. Any other questions?
So you're transitioning into video game design?
I want to, but I'm not ready. I think that's my retirement. Like, because I still want to do music. I'm terrified to do music because I got to do it with myself before I can find the right people, apparently. But yeah, not yet. But I want to. Because we're video game geeks, and every time we play video games, we're just like, this could be done so much better. But you had a question too?
Oh, do you guys ever want to do any other types of pedals besides fuzz pedal?
Yes, and it's funny because actually this is kind of the end of the line for my pedal company. I feel like it's the all or nothing.
Kind of the big deal.
Yeah, I just did a Kickstarter. It's my second Kickstarter actually. You know what Kickstarter is, right? Yeah. I'm back when I first started the pedal business, I knew the future was going to be an iPod for guitar effects, which is funny because Digitech is doing this now. It's a big company. They have a pedal that you can, USB adapter. You buy an effect off their website for $1 or $7 or whatever, and you can upload whatever pedal you want into that. That is the future digitally, but the DIY movement's happened since then, and DIY people can't exactly program. That's not an easy thing. It's easy to get into electronics. I could probably teach any of you, like in a week, how to do electronics. It'd take you so much longer to learn how to program effects. So what I decided is, instead of doing digital, it'd be great just to actually find a way to have the hardware be in a pedal that you can take hardware out, put hardware in, and of course, I should have brought this thing.
You should have.
The easiest way to do that would be...
We didn't really plan this.
Yeah, we didn't. Is cartridges, like video games. So I did a Kickstarter for what I'm calling the console, just straight up console, like, a video game console. And what it is it's just it's a unit. It's like a guitar pedal with input output and knobs on it. And then what you do is you just insert a cartridge. And that cartridge tells the knobs, the knobs do whatever the cartridge is. So like if you have going back to your question, we have, all of our fuzz pedals are going to be on cartridges now. So you put in the cartridge and then the 5 knobs do like volume, tone, whatever that fuzz pedal would do. We're also building reverb, delay, tremolo ring mod.
Yeah.
Yeah, all variety of stuff.
And then the Big Muff.
Are we doing that? I forgot.
The Silver Rose thing.
Oh, are we doing that? Yeah. Cartridges?
Yeah.
But it's great because what I'm excited about, going back to the DIY thing, is that these little cartridges, they're not, they're small, but they're big enough that people can put, like using the breadboard I was talking about earlier, people can then put whatever they want into the cartridges and create whatever they want. I mean, at all.
So the cartridge is like effectively like a little breadboard.
They can be. There's versions. So like we have one that literally can attach to a breadboard. We have one that's just what's called a perf board, which is it's permanent once you put it in and solder it together and stuff. But
and we're also we're opening it up to other developers actually.
Yeah, no, we contacted like 20
so
developers.
So it's completely like open source platform.
Yeah, and I mean, if anything, we're trying to create a standard. Is the idea just kind of like, I guess, yeah, just a standard for the cartridges, for the connector, for how it connects to the 5 knobs. But beyond that, we're encouraging everyone to just do what they want with the platform.
Now, one quick question. Everyone else comes first, but speaking of the Silver Rose, are we gonna?
Why would we do that?
Are we gonna have that conversation? Do everybody's questions first before we. Just as a cautionary tale.
let's do it. So Billy Corgan...
Well, no, ask... There are people with questions.
No, let's just talk about this. Billy Corgan hates me, and that's because this is the cautionary tale is about committing to being an online personality.
This is where things get interesting.
God, long story short, I've been a fan of Smashing Pumpkins since the very beginning, way back in the day. Siamese Dream, first concert I ever went to, and I eventually fell out of favor with the band. I didn't like them as much, but then I got in touch with Billy Corgan, and it was like fangirl all over again.
And this is actually when we first met.
Yeah, this is almost
like about that same period.
Yeah, and I was so excited. I was like, I'm gonna build a guitar pedal for Billy Corgan. This is great. And I asked him what he wanted, and I designed something with a friend of mine. And long story short, in this design process, I felt like he wasn't really into it, and I was kind of like, it was weird. It was like my fangirlness mixed with the business side of things, mixed with like the emotions I felt as a fan towards this band. And Billy Corgan was going down this weird path that I wasn't really interested in anymore.
I mean, there was a New Pumpkins kind of not being so great,
yeah,
and then wrestling.
Yeah. And he was being a douchebag in general. And, yeah. And needless to say, I started talking shit about his band on this in this fan forum with Smashing Pumpkins, and he got wind of it somehow. And the next thing you know, he's on Twitter calling me out, and he was calling me he, she. Like, instead of saying she's like a bad person, she's like, she is a very bad person, and she's the worst person I've ever met. And privately, he was sending me Facebook posts saying like he was gonna beat me up if he ever saw me and sue me, and it was madness.
It was pretty unpleasant.
And it's funny because then I posted a YouTube video in response to it on my business channel, which was actually my biggest regret of it all, because people just saw it as being drama, but I should have committed to it. I really should have committed to it and just been myself about it, because he was a big asshole.
Well, I would say that like there are some ways you could have handled it better, but I really wish you'd committed to it too, because it's not so much about the personal thing, but just about him being a transphobic dick.
Yeah.
That's my opinion.
But it's funny because I've met a lot of musicians and personalities in this long, crazy journey. And everyone tends to be exactly how you'd imagine them to be. Like, I've worked with Nine Inch Nails, and they've all been super badass. And Wilco, Nels Cline, just all these people that you hear good things about. And of course, the one person...
Nels Cline's super badass.
Yeah, Nels Cline's super badass. Of course, the one person you hear bad things about actually is crazy fucking sick. But yeah.
Yeah, pretty much. Sorry, I just felt that story was necessary.
Yeah, recently I've been trying to embrace her introducing me as, what did you say? How do you say it?
I introduce you as the girl who pissed off Billy Corgan.
Yeah. Yeah. All right.
So, yeah.
Any more questions?
Thanks for sharing, by the way. Good story. Like a beautiful story.
Do you
scare treats.
I thought it was wonderful. Solidified my love for you.
Yeah, go ahead.
So with the cartridges, are they like flash cards, or are they actually
No,
physical?
they're actual physical things. That's the thing with these days with what's called surface mount technology.
Yeah.
They're miniaturized components, and they do the exact same stuff as the bigger components. People argue this. This is kind of where we're going with the boutique world. People are like, no, we gotta use the big, new, old stock parts from the 60s, even though it does the exact goddamn same thing as the tiny, modern parts. So it's actually what I keep telling people is it's whatever you want on it. So there have been some companies that want to do a flash, like do a cart where they just do their own flash downloadable stuff onto it. But I think most people want to just try to miniaturize it onto the cart as is.
Yeah, because you can get it pretty small.
Yeah, and you can use big components too. It's just you got to stuff them the right way.
It sounds like the Arduino of guitar pedals.
Yeah, it's funny about Arduino because that was definitely an inspiration. I mean, I even actually looked in Arduino for a little while to see if you could, but once again, it's so high level to get into that stuff.
The standardization, like if you wanted to contact the Arduino team, like because they have created this ridiculous culture around their standardized infrastructure.
Yeah.
And they're part of the Open Hardware Alliance, and like, I don't know if you thought about joining up with
No,
hardware.
I'm about the philosophy, but I'm not good at the organizational stuff. So yeah.
The whole DIY culture, I think, would love it.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I don't know what it is. The thing with the boutique pedal business and DIY culture, the boutique industry, is it's still a very cliquey kind of place. So I think a lot of people are waiting to see this come to fruition to see if it'll actually I don't know. I think a lot of people are doubting me at this point. I don't think they're really doubting the concept. So
it's very similar with like the brand. Like if you're on SparkFun or Autofruit or something like that, people will you'll have credit because they respect those people and those websites.
Yeah, cool. Well, I look forward to getting into that then.
I have to ask. It sounds familiar. Arduino.
Yeah, it's what is Arduino exactly? Isn't it just the chip, based on the chip?
It's like a breadboard, but it's for doing robotics or other sorts of microcomputer programming.
Right. I think I've heard of it in passing. I'm not familiar with it.
It's actually built around a whole infrastructure of a new programming language that's more accessible, that's easier to learn, but it can also do a lot of cool stuff.
Yeah.
Got me intrigued.
Yeah.
But yeah, so.
Alright, is everybody else pretty as forthcoming with their information? Sounds like you share a lot of your secrets. Do you get criticism because of that? So you're like, this is great, I think everyone.
Well, there was a point where that people did praise me for that. I mean, because I was like one of the first people to call bullshit on everything. Because there was this one pedal maker who charged $500 for these pedals because they did everything by hand. And it's funny because when we got in this argument online about it, and finally they listed all the steps they went through, and 6 of the steps involved sanding down the case for spray painting it. So it was about painting the enclosure, like that was big part of the pride. But they did do everything by hand for the most part. But at the end of the day, it's more about function. I mean, just to give you an example of what we do versus them, we literally use paper labels for our artwork. And the reason I do that is because as a graphic designer, part of the thing that keeps me sane is creating new graphics. For like every few weeks, I'll just do a different graphic, and it'd be a lot harder if we were doing this complex screen printing setup and having to sand everything down. And
it takes so long to do any screen printing.
Yeah, and the thing is they actually hold up pretty well to abuse, and they look cool after they get scuffed up and stuff.
It's part of the appeal.
And it keeps everything cheap, because that's another thing too. Is we've been trying from the very beginning. I wanted things to stay affordable.
Yeah, I think that's been one of our actual big selling points. Is the fact that we're a lot more affordable than like most boutique fuzz.
Yeah.
Like a lot of the whole thing about it is the fact that it's all premium and expensive.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And this reminds me of this for some reason, but the boutique pedal industry is a really interesting microcosm of the sharing of free information. The idea that ideas are unchained and shouldn't be copyrighted or trademarked anymore. Because you can't trademark guitar pedals. It doesn't matter how out there your idea is, there's just no way you could do it.
Eventually someone's going to copy it.
Yeah, and the one person who ever tried to trademark something that I know of, everyone just laughs every time they send a cease and desist. It's for this little block of components they do to do reverb. And there's some other people who created a reverb of their own. It wasn't even a little block like they had, but they got cease and desist from them, and it was just like, what are you gonna do? Like, there's no precedence for this, and no court's gonna look at this and be like, but yeah, it's interesting. From the very beginning, the industry's all been about copying and cloning and modifying other people's stuff. And I was just watching this documentary recently about the clothes industry, and apparently it's the same kind of thing where you can't trademark or copyright a clothes like the way it's put together. So that's why brand names are such a big thing with clothing, where they put, you know, the Armani logo or whatever everywhere, because you can copyright that. But it's funny because even with like the name Big Muff, which is like synonymous with the best fuzz pedal out there that's been around forever, like people throw that word around